Welcome to this SportsCenter special Field Yates studio, along with Mel Kiper Jr., Matt Miller, as well as Jordan Reed. I'm Kevin Nagani here with Field Yates, who's ready for all the questions coming his way from our experts here. Let's talk about Tennessee. They're on the clock with the #1 overall pick. Who you got here in your mock?
Yeah, it's Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner from Colorado, Kevin, the most versatile prospect in not just this year's draft, but perhaps that we have seen over the last quarter of a century. I think there really is Pro Bowl ability for Travis Hunter as both a wide receiver and a corner. If you want to plant your flag on one side of the ball or the other, the upside is still tremendous. He's the most natural playmaker that I have seen in quite some time. And on top of all the physical traits, Kevin, scouts rave about the football character of Travis Hunter, one of the great kids in this entire draft, on top of being one of the great talents as well.
All right, one of the big storylines here is the need for Tennessee to find a quarterback here. And Mel, in your early mock, you have Cam Ward going #1. What do you make of this pick with Travis Hunter going to Tennessee?
When you pick #1, you want to get the best player, Kevin. The quarterbacks aren't the best player or the second or the third best player. Some barely think they're in the top 20. I'm at 4 and 5. So with that in mind, who is generational? As they said they want a generational talent, that would be Travis Hunter or
I guess you could argue Abdul Carter could go 1,
I'm
too.
big on Will Levis. I know those guys aren't. Okay, but I still believe in him. He's out in California with Jordan Palmer working on some things. He had some very good moments. He had some good stretches of 6-7 games where he was 7 touchdowns, 2 picks. But you got to love the quarterback. If you love Cam Ward, you bring him in. You see if Will develops. If he doesn't, you got the Cam Ward developing. If Cam Ward gets beaten out, like happened, hey, J.J. McCarthy was drafted. Sam Darnold was brought in. How'd that work out? J.J. got hurt. Sam became the guy. Sam Darnold's name's going to come up a lot because he has to be in the discussion here. Somehow, some way, they're going to bring in a quarterback to compete with Will Levis. There's no doubt about that. But do you take the best player, which in my opinion is Travis Hunter, then go get a Sam Darnold, or do you take a Cam Ward and pass on the best player in the draft? It's going to be an interesting discussion, and I'll tell you what, a lot of fascinating things are going to go on between now and the draft in relationship to Tennessee, who, oh, by the way, better shore up the right tackle spot. That was a disaster on the offensive line this past year and certainly impacted Will Levis.
Well, guys, whenever you're in position to take a quarterback at #1 overall, I simply think that you have to do it. And the one question that GM Mike Bergonzi has to ask himself is, in year 1, do I want to tie myself to one of the quarterbacks in this draft class? And I believe that they should do it. I believe Cam Ward is being severely underrated in this year's draft class. And when I look at Cam Ward, I see a quarterback that got better every single year. And if you think about his career, everywhere that he has been, whether it's at Cardinals Word in the FCS ranks, Washington State, and then most recently at Miami, he's had a profound impact everywhere that he's been. 4,300 passing yards, 39 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. He has those traits that you love to see at the position. He can play in structure, he can play outside of structure, but I love his poise and pressurized situation.
I don't know if I agree with all this now.
I love that we get a fired up.
I would not love to have.
It must be draft season. Mel's hitting the coffee early. He's yelling.
I would not love to
Sam
risk my
Darnold
job
and
as a
Will
GM
Levis.
on
So welcome to
Cam
draft
Ward
season.
or Shador,
I
I
don't think
think.
they should take Cam Ward. I also don't think they should take Travis Hunter. I would draft Abdul Carter. He's the best player in this draft. And I think you can make an argument after watching the Super Bowl that pass rushers are the second most important position in football behind the quarterback. I don't think either quarterback is warranted of that first overall pick. I love Travis Hunter, and I'm glad Field mentioned the off field because that is huge with him. High character. All he likes to do is fish, play video games, and play football. And we saw that last year because he played over 1,000 snaps. So the work ethic, the conditioning, all those things are tremendous. But when I've seen Travis Hunter play in person, he's 6'1", about 180, 185 pounds. And he's going to have to tackle Nico Collins and Brian Thomas Jr. if you play him at corner. If you play him at receiver, he's going to have to get tackled by Derwin James and Patrick Surtain. I have some concerns about the size. That's what pushes me to Abdul Carter, who was so good this past season. His first full year as a pass rusher for Penn State. He was explosive. He was dominant. We saw him in the College Football Playoffs. Travis Hunter is the second best player in this draft. No argument for me there. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these guys' field. My preference would be Abdul Carter, but it is going to be exciting and interesting to see what Tennessee does, or do the Titans trade this pick and let someone else have this debate about who the #1 overall pick should be if they want to maybe punt on this position and load up on draft picks for a big rebuild. Mel listed all the needs this team
Yeah, I mean,
has.
if Tennessee
That might be
trades
the
this
best
pick,
option for
who's
the
coming
Titans.
up to get?
First of all, for those that saw
You would
that
assume a
highlight,
quarterback.
the
Who's coming up
if
to
you
get
will, of
one?
Travis Hunter right there. Congratulations. You've basically now seen every bad
Giants?
of his from his 3 years in college, because there weren't
There were
very
three.
many to
That was
find.
it.
That's about
Yeah.
it, yes. Listen, I think the Abdul Carter versus Travis Hunter debate is a spirited one, and one that will come up in draft rooms around the NFL, not just for teams at the very top of the board. As of right now, nobody has told me that Travis Hunter has indicated to NFL teams, or that NFL teams have indicated to Travis Hunter, hey, we want you to play on one side of the ball, and we specifically want it to be this side. He averaged over 114 snaps per game last season. Even if Travis Hunter isn't a full-time offensive and full-time defensive player, I think there is simply too much of a skill set for him to not have utility on both sides of the ball. It makes him such a rare unicorn-type player that for a team that said, we're not going to take a quarterback and bypass a generational talent, he at least comes closest to fitting that bill for Tennessee. Abdul Carter, though, a very worthy candidate. Those have been the two top players in my rankings for quite some time, right?
Keep in mind, the Heisman winner, that is Hunter, played over 400 more snaps than any other FBS player and allowed a total of 1 touchdown in coverage last year. Let's go to the Browns here, Field, with the second pick. And you mentioned him. We've talked about him a lot during this segment. Abdul Carter at 2.
That's right. And whether Myles Garrett's there or not, I don't care. Abdul Carter's too good to bypass here for the Cleveland Browns. He had 12 sacks this past season. He was at his best during that college football playoff run, playing through injury and looking no worse for the wear in a good edge rushing class. Kevin clearly has the best first step, and there's versatility as well. Not quite like Travis Hunter, but this guy was a stand-up inside linebacker for Penn State prior to this year when he became a full-time edge after they lost 2 pass rushers to the draft. He looked dominant during his final college season, maybe the best defensive player in all of college football this past year. So Abdul Carter fits for really any team. But
I mean,
for
if you're a
Cleveland,
Browns
he's either
fan,
gonna
this
look
is
to
a
pair somebody
home run pick
or
at
have
2.
somebody sort of replace Myles Garrett. I'm not sure you can fully replace
I know you got to get a
Myles
quarterback,
Garrett. Abdul
but
Carter, to me, a no-brainer at number 2.
And you guys have already talked about it, that the value of that defensive line, that pass rusher, playing a huge role here as the NFL continues.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention Myles Garrett will be gone, so
who's going to bring the quarterback down? But Jordan, specifically the Browns, another team that needs a quarterback, especially somebody that they can grow with as the franchise, the face of the franchise. And you got Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders available. What do you think of number 2, the Browns going with Abdul Carter?
Well, I think this is the most interesting first-round pick in all of the first round, just because there's so many different directions that they could go. They could trade back, they could take Abdul Carter, they could take a quarterback, but Field has them taking Abdul Carter, and I think it's the right decision just because there is not a short-term solution to the situation that the Browns are in right now. The Deshaun Watson contract obviously was a disaster for them, but they do have questions at quarterback, but I think they have to see it through 2026, just because a quarterback is not going to improve the situation that you have going on right now. They could go out and get a veteran quarterback like a Sam Darnold or another veteran in Daniel Jones or somebody like that. But when we're talking about arguably the best defensive player in this year's draft, Abdul Carter potentially opposite of Myles Garrett, or even if you trade Myles Garrett, you have a really nice defensive piece to build around. Abdul Carter is a player that got the best pressure in all the country last year. Then he's a player that can be a 12-plus sack guy a year. So Abdul Carter, I think, will be a great addition here just because there is not a short-term solution at quarterback for the Browns right now.
Yeah, as the president of the Abdul Carter fan club, Jordan, I appreciate the nice setup on him. It's the right pick. Whether you lose Myles Garrett or not, I think the Browns situation, we also have to talk about a front office and a coaching staff that's under some fire right now. They need to show some progress in 2025. To me, this feels like a Kirk Cousins destination. Let's not forget, Kirk Cousins kind of toyed with the Browns back in the day to get a little bit more money from Minnesota. So maybe he ends up in Cleveland now. I think he'd be a great fit for Kevin Stefanski's offense. This could be a Daniel Jones landing spot. We got to remember he's out there. And no, those aren't long-term solutions like Jordan said so well. There is not a quick fix for the Cleveland Browns because they've dug themselves such a massive hole. And I think when you look at that situation, you have to say, who is the best player available in the NFL draft? That is Abdul Carter, especially at pick number 2. You can maybe turn a strength into a strength if you can somehow keep Myles Garrett with some moves you make in the offseason, or if not, like Field said, I don't think you can replace Myles Garrett with one player, one pick. This is as close as you're going to get in the 2025 NFL offseason to replacing a future Hall of Famer.
I think I agree.
Yeah, guys, we know they need a quarterback. That's obvious, right? But you can't force anything here. You got to get either the first player on your board, number 1 on your board, or number 2, and that's Carter or Travis Hunter. And they both fill need areas as well. The offensive line's a mess. You think about the wide receiver position. Quarterback's obviously going to be problematic because Deshaun Watson, as Jordan said, disaster, one of the worst trades in NFL history. So you get the pass rusher. You're in the AFC with all these great quarterbacks. So you got to get a quarterback at some point. You got Lamar, you got Burrow. Steelers always find, regardless of quarterback, a way to win 9 football games. So you get the pass rusher who can get after all these great quarterbacks, and you worry about quarterback later. It's a team that amazingly beat the Ravens and beat the Steelers. The Cleveland Browns did with Jameis Winston at quarterback. So there's some pieces around this team on both sides of the ball, but certainly Carter or Hunter make more sense for the Browns than drafting a quarterback at 2.
One point that I want to make very clear about this year's draft that is so different than last year's draft is regardless of what happened in free agency, the first 3 picks in last year's draft are going to be in some order: Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. The next 2 months, keep your Adam Schefter Twitter notifications turned on, because any of the teams that we have talked about so far, and those that we'll talk about over the next handful of picks, Kevin, who could be in the quarterback market, I think will turn over every stone related to the veteran quarterbacks. So the teams that we're talking about as quarterback suitors right now might, in 2 months, not be, could certainly influence how the very top of this draft board looks.
Yeah, to your point, free agency, of course, starting next month, and you could get that depth there at quarterback and understanding with a veteran, and then that opens things up potentially with Hunter as well as Abdul Carter with 1 and 2 with those picks as we discussed. All right, you mentioned teams that need quarterbacks. Still ahead, the Giants are on the clock, and the top 2 quarterbacks still on the board, and Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Find out which player Field has the Giants selecting, plus the surprise quarterback that goes later in round 1. Also, the Cowboys have many holes to fill, but wait until you hear who Field has them taking on the NFL Network. And as always, ABC's coverage focusing on the prospect's journey to the draft. And welcome back to Field Yates' mock draft special 3.0. We continue on with the 3rd pick. Field, who do the Giants take?
Cam Ward, the first quarterback, comes off the board, Kev. I think he's the best innovator of any quarterback in this class. He led the FBS in passing touchdowns during his first and last season at Miami. This guy has some magic to him late in games. Now, some of the naysayers will point out the fact that Miami found themselves in big holes this year, not just because of that bad defense, but because of some self-inflicted wounds from Cam Ward early in games. He's got some mobility, though. He's a threat with his legs. He's got a lot of, as Jordan said earlier in the show, got a lot of big moment moxie about him, and more so than any team in the entire NFL, the New York Giants are pressed to find a quarterback solution this offseason. If they don't get one via trade or free agency, make no mistake about it, they will take a quarterback 3rd overall.
So in this mock, they have the choice of their quarterbacks in the entire draft. And Mel, do you agree that Cam
If it comes down to those two,
with that selection?
Man, I think I would go with Shedeur,
Brian
but
Daboll, the mobile quarterback, I get it, okay? With
Yeah.
Cam Ward, and the ability to make any throw, a little reckless at times, but the arm talent is there. And the immobility and the ability to beat you with his legs is there, and to move around and create as well is something I think Brian Daboll would prefer maybe over Shedeur Sanders. But I think when you look at this football team, they had a really good draft this past year. The guys they added, getting a Tyrone Tracy in the 5th round, obviously Neighbors and Phillips and on the defensive side of the ball, and Theo Johnson. They did a good job there. Some of the other things they did, the opposite of turning to gold, go the opposite way. It didn't work out very well, but they can hang their hat on Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, the draft. Now you bring in Cam Ward, a young quarterback. You buy yourself some time, and you get a guy who can be a gunslinger in the NFL. So for the New York Giants and Brian Daboll, this seems to be a really good fit.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think, as far as from a coaching standpoint, that there's a better fit for Cam Ward in this year's draft class.
Cam Ward and Malik Neighbors would go crazy
Giants with Cam Ward and Brian Daboll. Just because when you're thinking about what Brian Daboll wants to do historically, he wants to push the ball down the field. And that's something that Cam Ward is able to do consistently. And the thing that I think is going to make or break Cam Ward's career is that he has to have a coach in his ear that's going to allow him to be him, but also know when to reel him back in as well. Just because, like we saw in the Cal game and we saw against Virginia Tech and against Duke as well, he's going to have those moments of where he has some turnover-worthy throws, but for every 9 or 10 highlight reel throws that he has, he's going to have 2 or 3 that make you scratch your head. So Brian Daboll is that type of quarterback developer that I think is going to allow him to be him, but also he's going to be able to reel him back in at times too.
No, absolutely. That's what he did for Josh Allen. And I'm not in any way comparing Cam Ward to Josh Allen, but Daboll has that experience. And I think where we saw some of the 2024 rookie struggles when they had a head coach or an offense coordinator who hadn't brought along and developed a young quarterback. And Dable has certainly done that. I also think with Cam Ward, like, he's number 3 player on my board. No, he's like 10th or 11th, right? But they need a quarterback. In that way, it's a lot like Bo in on him and said, this is our guy. He's going to be the quarterback on the board. We're going to draft him. We're going to build a scheme and a team around him. And they went to the playoffs with it. So I do think the Giants have those pieces. They have the coach in Dable who's been there. He's been through it with a young quarterback. And Ward certainly has the experience going from Incarnate Ward to Washington State to Miami, where, by the way, every one of those teams got better once he was the quarterback. And I know Miami's got some dudes that are going to be drafted in the top 100 picks. They weren't doing the things that they did with Cam Ward in 2023. They weren't those guys until he got there. So I think the way that he can elevate a program like the U should give Giants fans a lot of hope for what he can do in year one in this offense with some of those young pieces they've done a really good job of assembling.
All right, so Field, you got Cam Ward going to the Giants. The real question is, there's no clear-cut number 1 quarterback. So the question is, were you ever thinking about Shedeur Sanders here at 3 with the Giants over Cam Ward?
I think it's going to be a debate that I would say all 32 front offices will share as well, Kevin, is what kind of quarterback are you looking for? If you're looking for the guy who I mentioned has better innovation skills, who can turn nothing into something, I think that Cam Ward gives you that. If you're playing in a system that wants to throw on rhythm and timing with your passing game, maybe you prefer Shedeur Sanders, who is the best pocket passer in this year's class. I, in this circumstance, lean towards Cam Ward because he is my higher-graded quarterback prospect. It's also worth noting that neither of these prospects is inside my top 12 overall. So while one of them is going to go as the first quarterback off the board, it likely will be in a spot that's incongruent with where my overall rankings has them, as we know. And it wasn't really the case last year because the first 3 picks were all guys that look like they're going to be home runs already in the NFL or will be in time. I do believe that this year we're going to see that quarterback push up the board that we have been so accustomed to over the years, where guys kind of have their value a touch inflated.
Keep in mind, too, the most important thing, and you guys always experience this, is it's not just so much the prospect, it's also the coaching and pairing them together. Dable's quarterback background isn't just Daniel Jones and Josh Allen. Dable has passing a game coaching experience. Tom Brady, Brett Favre,
he was the
Jalen
Pats
Hurts,
tight
and
ends
Tua
coach back in the
Tagovailoa.
day.
So he brings that to the table, whoever he decides to draft and mold here. Let's get to picks number 4 and 5. Field, who do you have the
Speaking
Patriots
of,
selecting at number
okay,
4?
Will
What
Campbell.
debate the Patriots would have in this circumstance,
We will
Campbell,
take
who
that.
feels a major need, or Mason Graham to be the best player on my board at this point for number 4 overall. I landed on Will Campbell, who was terrific basically from day one at LSU. Became a starter right away, protected for Jaden Daniels for 2 seasons. Then this past season, Garrett Nussmeier, I think he has the best feet of any tackle in this class. There are going to be some questions about the arm length. I'd try him out at left tackle until we are proven that he cannot handle that spot in the NFL. Mason Graham, the game wrecker for Michigan, goes to Jacksonville, who was terrible in basically every defensive category last season. Graham, 21 years old right now. He arrived at Michigan as an 18-year-old and immediately looked like one of the best players on a team loaded with future NFL defensive talent. He can be a dominant run defender. He's also an incredible pass rusher. The way that he impacts the integrity of the interior of a pocket, very difficult to find an answer for Mason Graham.
And Mason Graham, I just immediately think of how dominant Milton Williams and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis were, of course, just a few days ago in the Super Bowl victory for the Eagles at that defensive tackle position. Coming up, why the Raiders are high-fiving Field Yates' mock draft right now. Sports Center special. Field Yates' mock draft 3.0, and the Raiders are on the clock. Field, who do you have them taking here?
Shedeur Sanders, a name that everybody who is watching this knows, the Colorado quarterback who was excellent in his 2 seasons out there in Boulder, goes to Las Vegas, the best pocket passer in this year's draft. His combination of accuracy, touch, and placement is really exceptional. This is a guy who took way too many sacks last year. That's going to be one of the biggest questions entering the draft for Shedeur Sanders. That offensive line in Colorado, not very good. You're going to have to surround him with a better one at the NFL level.
Well, Tom Brady would love this.
He got up.
They definitely know each other.
I was blown away by that, his 2 years at Colorado. Jordan, what do you make of this fit here with Shedeur Sanders going to Vegas?
I think it's a perfect fit just because when we're talking about just the Tom Brady and the Shedeur Sanders connection, that's an obvious one. But this is the team that I feel like wants to win right away. And no offense to Mel, Pete Carroll will be 74 years old at the beginning of next season. So this is a team that I feel a franchise that needs a quarterback desperately. And Shedeur Sanders is the type of player that I think of all the quarterbacks in this year's draft class is the most polished passer in this year's group and has the chance to be the best in year one right away, just because of how well he sees the field. A 74% completion percentage a season ago, which was the best in the country. He has a skill set that translates right away on the next level.
Yeah, Jordan, a lot of days I feel like I'm 84, pal, so I'm right with you on that one. But in terms of what the Raiders are going to do, Shedeur Sanders, to me, it screams because of the Tom Brady connection. But also, how about Sam Darnold? Adam Schefter has talked about Sam Darnold. They didn't get the quarterback last year, Michael Penix Jr., right, because they sat where they were. But they had to settle for Brock Bowers, who, by the way, was my 6th highest rated player. How'd that work out? Brock Bowers is phenomenal. So do you go Sam Darnold and then get a player instead of the quarterback, or you say, hey, Shedeur is our guy. We don't need Darnold. We're in a division now with Mahomes, Herbert, and Nix. We can't be 4th, and we're in the AFC with all the great
I think the Raiders probably view him as,
they're going to get one of those two.
you
They
know,
also have to worry about,
if nothing else, we're going to sell some jerseys. We're going to draft a star here to compete with Mahomes.
Like the New York Jets, and they're stuck at 6 with no quarterback, and Sam Darnold goes somewhere else. It's going to be really interesting to see how the Raiders attack this, because somehow, some way, it's Shedeur Sanders, Sam Darnold. Somebody's got to be the quarterback in that AFC West, and it's going to be fun to see how they attack it.
Yeah, and they can't wait until the draft to have that answer, Mel, to your point. You either got to make the move in free agency to get Sam Darnold or pull off a trade for a player, or you have to move up in the draft. I don't think you can do what you did last year and sit back on your hands and say, it'll be okay, no one's going to draft Michael Penix Jr., and then we see the Falcons do it. They can't do that this year with Shedeur Sanders and say, oh, gee, well, Cam Ward's off the board. No one else is going to draft a quarterback. We'll just sit and wait. That cannot be the strategy for this new regime. So I love the fit for Shedeur Sanders. We're going to talk so much about he and Tom Brady being throwing buddies in the offseason. That's awesome. I would be curious to see how he would fit in Chip Kelly's offense and how Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll fit together, because Pete is like old school, let's run the ball down your throat. I think that fits Shedeur well, especially early on. We just saw what Chip Kelly did at Ohio State.
I mean, if you're Chip Kelly, if you're any offensive coordinator, and you have a system that doesn't fit your players,
the Raiders, they got to get a running back. They've got to get a #1 wide receiver. We got to see what happens with Michael Mayer coming back to be that complement at tight end to Brock Bowers. So they have some holes.
You take the players you have and you make it work. Like that's the point here.
Helps a ton. I don't know that this is like a ready-made situation as much as the New York situation would be for Cam Ward, where you don't have a Malik Neighbors, you don't have an Andrew Thomas. Colton Miller's a good player, but not to that level. So there are a lot more questions for the Raiders. Hopefully they set that table better for the quarterback through trades, through free agency, and then we'll see whether it's
I don't know how
Sam
much
Darnold
cap space the
or
Raiders
Shedeur
have,
Sanders or
but
someone else at the
they got to
quarterback.
surround
Matt,
Shedeur
there was
with
a part of it
something.
almost wished I had
He
the
does have
Cam
Brock
Ward
Bowers,
and
though.
Shedeur
That's really
Sanders
nice.
Picks flipped, just because I would love to see Cam Ward in this Chip Kelly offense. However, I am becoming more and more bullish on this stance. Is that when you're drafting a quarterback early in the draft, we talked about this a lot with Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury going into last year, is that you need to fit your system to what the player does well. Let's be honest. The quarterback is more valuable to the franchise if he becomes successful than the coach does. Which one of these guys, if they reach their apex, makes $60 million a year? The answer is the quarterback, not the OC. So I do think that Chip, although many people...
There's so
will
many
associate
examples,
him
too,
with
if you
what we
can
saw
see,
this
like,
past year with Will
coordinators
Howard,
that try to, like,
at Ohio
fit
State.
square
Kept
pegs
the first
into a
time. He
round
ran
hole.
for
Like,
27 touchdowns,
I just
2
can't
interceptions
believe
season.
that, like, you'd be an
Nick
offensive
Foles,
coordinator
who that much better
ever in the
athlete than
NFL, and you're
Shedeur
not
Sanders, if he is even a better athlete
adapting
at
what
all
you
than
do to
Shedeur
your best
Sanders,
players. You're
I
just
know
like,
feels
no,
like
we're going to
a million
run
years
what
ago,
I
it was
run.
a high-functioning
Doesn't matter who we
Philadelphia
have, what their
offense. So
strengths
I do
are.
hope they
Like,
can find a way to meet in the middle.
I can't
if
believe
this
people do
scenario
that.
comes to pass.
That happened in 2014, and also he brought in Sam Bradford. He wanted to get a guy that can stay in the pocket. Chip will move things around, and by the way, you talk about money, getting $6 million as the new OC with the Raiders.
I think
We will
Chip Kelly,
see
he'll
how
probably do a
that
good job,
plays
but the
out.
Raiders
By the
are
way,
just,
Kiper's hair
they're
still
not
looks
that
like he's
close right now.
44. He's that good. It is that impressive each and every year we bring him back and talk about the draft here. All right, Field, let's talk about specifically picks 7 through 9. And
All
let's
right.
start with the Jets, Jets.
Yeah, let's go to Georgia for a pair in a row here, Kev. We start with Mykel Williams, who looks like he could start for the New York Knicks at small forward with this length. This guy is an absolute freak in terms of the physical traits. He had just 14 sacks during his 3 years at
As a
Georgia,
Pats
but his
fan,
very
I
best
don't love
moments
this
look like
pick.
Walker, top 5 player in the draft, in my opinion, would go to Carolina in these circumstances. Another guy who we have talked about having some versatility, like Abzo Carter, a stand-up inside lineman from Arizona, the only player in all of FBS to have at least 1,300 yards receiving in each of the past 2 seasons.
T-Mac
Goes
to the
New Orleans.
Saints.
We saw how basically empty the cabinet was with the injuries to both Chris Olave and also Rashid Shaheed. This
Yeah,
guy's
Olave
got
got
an
murked this year.
outstanding catch radius. You see his volleyball background show up on plays like that right there. An excellent target in the red zone for whoever the quarterback is for the New Orleans Saints in 2025.
Well, we know who's the head coach. It's just coming in that Kellen Moore will be.
Well, if I remember
coach of the New
correctly, and
Orleans
correct
Saints,
me if
that
I'm
news
wrong,
coming
Saints
over
fans,
in the
but
last couple of hours
I don't
here.
know if
So,
these
Matt,
rumors were true, but they were going to
help us
maybe
understand
trade
about
Derek
this
Carr
fit here,
before last year because they
specifically
liked
going wide
Spencer
receiver,
Rattler
first
so
one
much
off
in the
the board in New
preseason.
Orleans.
So maybe we see that. I don't know.
I don't love the value, but when you look at the board, there's like 5 blue chip players in this class, and they went early. Field had them going pretty much in the top 5 picks. So I think if you're the Saints, you look at this and say, okay, our board has kind of been wiped out. We just saw 2 pass rushers go. The 2 quarterbacks are gone. Will Campbell's off the board. So any pick that they would make at this spot feels like a reach because all our blue chip players are gone. I like McMillan. I've comped him to Drake London throughout the entire process. 85 catches this year, 84 catches, excuse me. He's going to win over the top, but he has the speed to do some of the underneath stuff. So if you're a Saints fan, you're looking at this like, okay, like here's a 6'5" wide receiver. How does this help our offense? I do think it does help Derek Carr, right? Some of his best days when he had these wide receivers who had the extended catch radius. So at value, you're going to look at our big boards and say, oh, geez, McMillan's the 15th player on the big board. He goes at 9. Almost any pick at this spot, I would argue, is a reach. So Fields in a tough spot. The Saints are getting him at a tough spot when we get to Green Bay and we're actually watching the draft fold out because there's just the blue chip has been wiped off. So McMillan, it does feel like best player available at a position of need for them.
And they bring in an offensive-minded head coach in Kellen Moore there, and we just saw what he did specifically with the 2 wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith during that Super Bowl run with the Eagles. All right, let's go to
that would make a
number
lot of
10,
sense.
And let's go 10 through 12. Let's start with the Bears there. Who you got?
Yeah, Kelvin Banks Jr. from University of Texas. Another guy like Will Campbell from LSU who started 3 years. True freshman, day 1 starter at a high-leverage situation, protecting for Quinn Ewers at Texas. Did not have his best, most dominant season this past year. Dealt with an injury late in the year as well, but does kind of a lot of everything well. Kevin had one of the lowest, one of the
Caleb
swing
Williams.
players in this entire class.
Got to protect him.
The entirety of this year.
I was going to say, Josh Simmons, I know is really good. Didn't he get hurt?
4 overall. That's the kind of upside he brings to the table. But he had a major injury back in October. His agent has said he expects
overall, but if he never got hurt, I could see it for sure.
Begin next season. A year away from now, Deron
Will
Bland
Johnson
will be a free agent. Jordan Lewis going to be a free agent next month. This team is maybe less deep at corner than you realize. Will Johnson played 6 games this past season. He had 2 pick sixes in those coming into last season. If I told you he was going to go 12th overall, Kevin, you'd say it was one of the great.
This would be nice for the Cowboys, but I do think their defense is already kind of straight.
What do you think of the Cowboys?
I think you need another wide
here in
receiver,
this
which you
monster
can get
field?
later. You don't have to take them at 12, but
I don't see it. I think if Will's there, and I think Fields right. If Will's there and he runs into low 4.5s, maybe he drops down to this 12th spot. The 40 time is going to be critical for Will Johnson. I think it goes somewhere in the top 10. If he's there, it's going to be interesting. But they have needs at running back. Ashton Genty has to be in the discussion. They've had success going running back over the years. You know, Zeke Elliott, Emmitt Smith, got Tony Pollard, though, in the 4th round. How are they going to figure that out? The running back spot. How about Tedero McMillan if he were there at 12? If I'm the Cowboys, I'd look at McMillan, T-Mac from Arizona. So I think there's other options. They have offensive line, defensive line. Obviously, everybody can use a corner like Will Johnson. He's only going to be there, though, at 12 if he runs at 4.52, 4.55, 40. He runs into 4.4s, he's going in the top 10.
And a reminder, the Combine is at the end of the month in Indy. We will get some numbers in, of course, over the next 2 months here. All right, Phil.
Ready.
Let's go.
Ready.
Let's go. All right.
Yeah.
Picks 13 through 19.
Yeah.
Give us a couple of interesting guys to watch from this group here.
And my apologies, Tyler Warren from Penn State, the outstanding tight end. He's the 9th overall player on my board. It goes to 14th just because teams filling other more premium position needs. This guy had 700 yards after the catch this past season, Kevin. He had just a ridiculous game against USC that a lot of the country saw. He was playing wildcat quarterback for Penn State. He was the best player on this Penn State offense by a mile. There was no answer for Tyler Warren. The guy is also an outstanding blocker in the running game. Meanwhile, Mike Green from Marshall, if you watched the Senior Bowl practices, you saw this play right. Boom! That's Josh Connolly right there, a first-round offensive tackle. I get it. It's not about one play. Mike Green led all of FBS in sacks last season, 17 to be precise. He had one huge matchup against Ohio State. What did he do? Threw a nasty spin move to sack Will Howard for a big play. Mike Green, a guy who I think could go in the first 15 picks.
By the way, in that Senior Bowl, that circle is a big deal. They want to see, all the scouts want to see the one-on-one matchups, right?
Oh, yeah.
My goodness, that's a way to make an impression. How about this? A Bronco becoming a Bronco at 20?
You love when a thing works out like Ashton Genty this past season. The guy was an absolute force on the ground. At one point, he was averaging over 10 yards per carry. That being said, Kev, I think probably the most underrated part of Ashton Genty's game is last year he had nearly 570 receiving yards. This year, Boise State was too busy running down every team's throat that they barely utilized him as a receiver. He is a legitimate three-down back. Sean Payton says, I want a joker this offseason. Mission would be accomplished by adding Ashton Genty.
That's an interesting take. I do like that you brought up his receiving numbers just a couple years ago.
I mean, is
So what do you
Javonte
think,
Williams
Jordan,
a free agent?
Of Genty in Payton's offense?
Well, feels lucky Mel isn't beside him just because taking a running back in the first round, you know how adamant Kiper is about that. But I think this is a running back that is worthy of going in the first round. Not only the first round, I think he's worthy of going in the top 15 picks. Now, he isn't the prospect, in my opinion, that we saw a couple of years ago with Bijan Robinson and also Jahmyr Gibbs, but he is clear in a way the best running back in this year's draft class. And if you just take his yards after contact into the equation, he has more yards after contact than rushing yards total of the next running back, who was Amarian Hampton, with over 1,600 yards.
Amarian Hampton's good. He could be a late first-round pick potentially.
From not only just a running standpoint, but also, as Phil mentioned, he's an underrated receiver as well, a player that was originally a wide receiver coming into his years at Boise State as well. So this is a player that I think would really improve not only the Broncos offense, but he would help Bo Nix out as well.
Fantastic person on the field as well and off the field. Keep in mind, Genty finished only 27 rushing yards shy of Barry Sanders' single-season record last year as he finished second in the Heisman race. Coming up, Field has the Steelers taking a quarterback at number 21. Find out who it is and why Mel does not agree with the choice. You don't want to miss that. Back here in our mock draft special, we are at pick 21, and this is where it gets interesting. Field, who do you have the Steelers taking?
We are throwing a dart at Jackson. Jackson Dart, to be specific, the quarterback from Ole Miss. And I just got to tell you, Kev, I like the player. This guy had an incredible career at Ole Miss. He broke Eli Manning's school record for passing yards. He's got good accuracy. He is a good athlete. We did not see a ton of his legs in terms of design.
Not sure Jackson Dart's a first-round pick, but Steelers are going to need somebody.
Right here. Also had a strong week at the Senior Bowl. And let's just be honest, this team has settled at quarterback too much. They went 0-5 to finish this past season, including, of course, a 28-14 loss against the Ravens in the playoffs. In their final 4 regular season games, Russell Wilson failed to throw over even 220 yards. I get it. There is a ceiling versus floor debate that Pittsburgh has seemingly had in recent years. We get a floor of a quarterback, we can make the playoffs. I'm not worried about the playoffs anymore for the Steelers. I'm worried about the Lombardi trophies. That's the kind of organizational excellence that Pittsburgh is after, and after having lost 5 straight playoff games, it's time for them to try something different and go young at quarterback.
Okay, and they've tried here multiple times.
I don't know. This isn't new for the Steelers. Like, historically, they're a great organization, but the last 10 years they haven't been.
Hey, Justin Fields.
It's been amazing Mike Tomlin's still been able to make the playoffs, but...
So, Mel, with that in mind, what do you think of this pick at 21 with Jackson Dart going to Pittsburgh?
All I said when I saw this, Kev, is no, young Fielding Yates. No.
Bring it on.
Jackson Dart, I like him as QB3, but I don't like him to the Steelers. And I'll tell you why. Justin Fields, much higher grade coming out of college than Jackson Dart will have. Justin Fields was a steal getting him from Chicago, right, for a late-round pick. Mike Tomlin had him for a year and saw he's a leader. You don't have to be a yeller or screamer to be a leader and get those guys.
Yeah, it's amazing they're just going to move on from Fields, too.
4-2 as a starter. Should have been 6-0 if the defense
I wouldn't.
Their job. He's young. He's talented. He wants to be in the same system for back-to-back years where he seems like he's never had the ability to be in, right, and benefit from that. So for me, you got your quarterback. Go get a receiver, okay, that's consistent. Emeka Ibuka, Mike Miller's favorite, Luther Burden III, was still here. You got cornerback, defensive line, but you got your quarterback, young Fielding. You don't need to take Jackson Dart here. Guess what? Is it Will Howard? Is it Kyle McCord?
Nope.
Is it Jalen Milroe? Is it Louis Riddick's favorite, Tyler Shuck? We don't even know who QB3 is right now. So I go wide receiver. I take Ibuka or Burden III, and I stick with Justin Fields, young Fielding.
Mel, not bad by you. I was hoping you'd lay it on me a little thicker earlier on in the show, but I will not forget, Kevin, this time last year in one of my mock drafts, I had Bo Nix going to the Steelers.
Yes,
and all the Steelers fans said, You can't take Bo. That guy's got no upside. Rather run it back or find a way to acquire a guy like Justin Fields. We have to see these players. You have to give them a chance. The devil you don't know sometimes surpasses the devil you do know. And I get it. We don't know exactly what Jackson Dart's going to do.
I can make this argument right now for let Fields play with the Steelers for a year.
Offense last year, basically their goal was protect the football and let the defense win games for us. That formula does not work for this version of the Pittsburgh Steelers to reach maximum height. I am going to swing, acknowledging this is a player who's not in my top 32 prospects, to see if the upside of Jackson Dart can help take this team to the next level.
I don't know, man.
Field, us young guys got to stick together, but I got to agree with Kiper on this one. I don't see the value here. Here's also the thing. Jackson Dart is not ready to play right away. Coming out of Lane Kiffin's offense, my guy is not ready to see an NFL field right away. And I know we could cut the field. We can build a scheme that works for him. Pittsburgh's not going to do that with Arthur Smith, right? So Jackson Dart needs time to sit and wait. Who are you going to, is Russell Wilson going to be the placeholder for a year? That didn't work. If it's Justin Fields, well, that's a completely different offense than you're going to run with Jackson Dart. They are about as polar opposite in terms of quarterback play as you're going to get. So I like Jackson Dart. And I will say this, when you talk to scouts and teams, hearing that Jackson Dart's going to go late first round, that buzz is out there, and it has been for a while. So I think Field is right in getting Jackson Dart on the back end of this mock draft. Pittsburgh is more the sticking point of, if they're going to do this, it feels like they have to go all in on Jackson Dart, and you almost have to sign a veteran that can be that placeholder for him that's going to be a similar type of quarterback.
I don't know. If I was the Steelers, I don't think I'd be doing this.
You would love this pick because Jackson Dart can throw a beauty of a deep ball. So maybe this is what gets George Pickens bought back in and happy with the offense, because the deep ball would absolutely be back with Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I'm with Mel and Matt here. I just think it's just way too high for Jackson Dart. And I know he got better this season, and he's gotten better throughout the 3 years of his career, but I just think this is way too high for him. And Matt mentioned the learning curve for him is going to be very steep, especially coming out of that Lane Kiffin offense that is a lot of isolated reads. He's not going through a lot of progressions. And yes, we saw him do that at the Senior Bowl, which was a huge box that he needed to check with a lot of scouts that I've even talked to. But there is a lot of confidence that eventually he can get there. But to take that type of player at number 21 overall, it would just be a little bit of a reach for me, just because it's just a little bit too high for him.
I'm going to agree to have all three of you contribute to a fund to buy me some new shoes so that I can take my victory lap in when Jackson Dart finds his way around pick 20, come April 24th in Green Bay. You guys are all sitting here poo-pooing the pick. Watch what happens once we get to the actual draft itself. All these veteran quarterbacks are going to land somewhere. I understand where you're coming from, sort of, but I think Jackson Dart finds his way into round one.
I'll just say one thing. At this pick, the Steelers just pick somebody on offense to help. Help the offense. You need weapons. They did not have weapons. That could be a quarterback, wide receiver. You just need offensive weapons. Even running back. They just have not figured it out over the last couple years. All right, let's get to picks 22 to 30. What stands out here in your mind in the mock field?
Yeah, so we have a few names here, but I think that
Luther Burden all the way to 25. CJ Stroud would love that.
25th overall to the Houston Texans, who, of course, are facing the possibility of not having Tank Dell for all of next season. Stephon Diggs is coming off of an ACL and a free agent. He came into this year with huge expectations, as in like top 10 pick overall expectations. The production was not good this past season. He was not nearly as explosive after the catch as he was last year. That being said, there are those that believe he can rediscover that form. Emeka Ibuka from Ohio State, who, by the way, Kevin, leaves Columbus with the most catches in school history. Have they ever had a decent wide receiver at Ohio State? Oh, they do every single year. We can talk about a lot of different traits. He's a great football player, and he's clutch as all get out. The football character also off the charts here. The Commanders looking for that number 2 wide receiver opposite of Terry McLaurin. Served them well when they went to Ohio State for McLaurin.
He would be dangerous in that offense, no doubt about it. All right, we aren't done yet on this mock draft special. After Patrick Mahomes was destroyed by the Eagles defense in the Super Bowl, he's going to like what Field predicts for Kansas City in
11.
His pick at number 31 as we continue Field's mock special. Love hearing the great Merrill Reese and the great Mike Quick on the call. And with that win for the Eagles, it brings us to the last 2 picks here, Field. Who do you have the Chiefs taking at 31?
Yeah, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. It was a career guard until October of this past year, Kevin, when he kicked out to left tackle following an injury to Josh Simmons. By the end of the season, he looked real comfortable at left tackle. That being said, I think his best spot in the NFL is back at guard. The Chiefs looking at the possibility of losing Trey Smith, and we know their offensive line was no match for that Eagles defensive front. during the Super Bowl. And finally, your Philadelphia Eagles get Jahad Campbell, my top-ranked inside linebacker in this year's class out of Alabama. Zach Bond going to be a free agent. We'll see whether he sticks around in Philly. But Nakobe Dean coming off of a major patella injury. Inside linebacker, perhaps an area a bit vulnerable for this excellent roster in Philadelphia. On top of the sideline-to-sideline range for Campbell, on occasion he was used as an edge rusher in Philadelphia. He got home often.
I like these picks. I mean, at this point in the draft, you're talking about really good teams, so these kind of feel like luxury picks, even though that's never really true. You do need to draft well, even if you're a good team.
It's great. And guys, I remember after the Tampa Super Bowl loss, General Manager Brett Veach told me he would never let Mahomes be that unprotected again. Well, he was Sunday night. And so the Chiefs, I expect, are going to invest in the offensive line. They got to figure out left tackle. Phil mentioned right guard Trey Smith.
They got to figure out a plan with, Travis Kelce. They're not getting anything from him, so they're going to have to find a new way forward on offense. That obviously, no more Tyreek Hill. Kelce's going to be gone sooner than later.
Giving Mahomes some of that protection he needs.
They do have Rashee Rice coming back and Worthy and stuff, but
left tackles this past season. That's going to change. We all understand that's going to change. All right.
Juju and DeAndre Hopkins ain't getting it done either. So
the next time we talk, February 25th, and Mel's latest